Welcome, everyone, to the House of Hustle podcast on Sports Radio 810. We are presented by our friends at Charlie Hustle. I am your host, Jared Sutton. I'm joined, as always, by Steven St. John. We are 2 games in to the NBA Finals, and we have a series, 1-1. Very exciting. We talked this morning on the Border Patrol a little bit about Game 1 and Game 2. It's a fun series, Steven. It's been a lot of fun to just kind of Game 2 finally taking that twist that we wanted to see Miami even the series in a very competitive, very thrilling Game 2. And here we are, 1-1.
I'm a moron. That's what we're going to start.
And welcome to the podcast.
Big dummy, because I watched Game 1 and I thought,
I think everybody felt this, by the way, not just you.
I had done all these mental gymnastics looking at the series on paper to try to justify why I thought the series would go 6 or 7 games. And then we get to the actual game, and it played out. It looked like a 1 seed and an 8 seed. And I know that the Heat had that run where they got it down to 10 points, but 10, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It was never. It was almost like Denver was keeping little brother at arm's length, and that's cute. You got it within 10 points. Now we're gonna put you away. And I'm thinking, this does not look like a series that's gonna go 6 or 7 games. And so then I thought, man, this is just gonna be a letdown. Denver's too good. And look, and that very well could have been the case, because Denver breezed through the Western Conference, and they've been one of the best teams all year long. They've had a guy that should be a 3-time MVP probably and the best player in the league, and they've got stars all over the floor and everything else. And so then after Game 1, I'm thinking, the writing was on the wall. I was stupid in trying to change the narrative to fit what I wanted to see. I go to Game 2, and I didn't think it was going to happen, but the Heat win in Denver, and they hand Denver their first home loss of the of the playoffs. And so I'll admit it, I was wrong.
Yeah.
It took me 1 game to give up on the Heat.
But you're back.
I'm back now.
You're back.
I'm back on the bandwagon, but and you say I was not alone in that assessment, right?
Right.
What did you think after Game 1? You're like, oh man, this isn't the best matchup in the world. Right?
Yeah, I thought I look at it from now, a league perspective of just, you want the interest to be there for the series, but just because of, I think there was that, Lakers, Celtics chatter going into the, the conference finals. So the fact it's Denver and Miami, you just wanted some sort of storyline and to really carry this series. And after Game 1, and I said this morning, Game 1 was, I think Miami struggled with the altitude. I really think that was a little bit of a problem early on in Game 1. Denver played great, and they played with a level of fearlessness that they've played throughout the playoffs. And Jokic was, they were just not afraid of the moment. Well, then Miami comes out in Game 2 and really, after being smacked early in Game 1, they really took the fight to Denver in Game 2 and made significant adjustments from Erik Spoelstra to his lineup and to just a lot of, just from a play call standpoint, offense, defense, everything looked a little bit different. And there were some tweaks there that I really think made a difference in Game 2. So the point being, in this type of series in the NBA Finals, every game has a different plot twist, if you will, to the story, because coaches are so intertwined with making adjustments, and that comes from personnel. We saw it with Miami starting Kevin Love. Denver, we'll see what happens here, because Denver played Christian Braun off the bench in Game 2 and had to go to him really for defensive purposes, and Christian Braun gave him some good minutes. Had a couple buckets, had a nice dunk in transition. So both these coaches in Mike Malone and Erik Spoelstra, they have a solid bench, and they can go deep into that bench. I think Miami has some really good experience, NBA Finals experience, with Kevin Love in the equation here. Kyle Lowry, another veteran presence that's been in the finals, been in these moments, won a championship. That's what makes this series fun now is, Miami is still the underdog. Denver is still the favorite. But I think this is the first time, to your point about Denver kind of breezing through the Western Conference, this is the first time they're really facing adversity. And Miami, they're a team that has won the most games by 5 points or less in the NBA all season. So they like these type of games that are possession by possession, that are kind of mucked up, that are games that, maybe down the stretch can really have, whether it be lulls or a back and forth, or games where, it's so physical. Miami loves that. That's what their kind of DNA is, and everybody's bought in on that side of it. So Miami to me, it comes back to their culture. It comes back to guys at Max Strus, who got off to a horrible game one, had an offer. Gabe Vincent was really good. Duncan Robinson was very good. These role players really matter in this type of series, and I think it's going to be what dictates who wins this series.
Duncan Robinson went off at the beginning of that fourth quarter, and I do want to
mention, beat a shooter. Can't beat a shooter.
Well, but still, he was even driving to the basket.
Yeah, he was.
They couldn't guard him.
Yep.
I do want to mention that our wonderful sponsor is Charlie Hustle. You can get all of what they have at charliehustle.com.
Vintage swag.
I demand this right here.
Oh, my gosh. I was just about to ask you, what is this right here? My goodness. Let's
see that, people?
This
is a
premier.
Nick Bolton Crazy Tiger T-shirt. Nick Bolton has the arms of a tiger.
With the tiger.
And he's running the football like he was in the Super Bowl.
Man.
Have you seen that shirt?
I have not. This is a first.
Here's the deal, Charlie Hustle. Why don't I have this shirt? That's a very simple question I have for you.
There's always new, fresh, vintage swag they come out with. They
got a tiger tail.
They always outdo themselves.
Arms of a tiger.
Yeah. God, that's fair. And it is the Super Bowl run to the house, which he should have had maybe 2 in the Super Bowl. But that's for another podcast.
I'm just telling you, if you love Mizzou, you get that Nick Bolton Crazy Tiger T-shirt.
Let's go.
And you get the biggest size they got and give it to me, because I'm big boned. They call me thick. THICC. Thank you. Charlie Hustle's got sizes for everyone. CharlieHustle.com. So thank you to Charlie Hustle. Back to Duncan Robinson. The Nuggets, I'm betting if they were thinking, what's the recipe we could lose, it wasn't Duncan Robinson exploding to start the fourth quarter.
No.
Right?
No, it wasn't. It also probably wasn't Kevin Love's. I don't think they were ready for Kevin Love going plus 20 in 22 minutes, which is a huge part of what Eric Spoelstra's adjustments were. Gabe Vincent hitting 4 threes. Really across the board, just them, Max and Gabe hitting 4 threes was big. Duncan Robinson in a couple threes, but like you said, Duncan Robinson was 4 or 5 from the field in 17 minutes. Really gave him good minutes. He is still a mismatch on defense, but that's where again the adjustments come in, where Miami switched up and went more to a zone look in the second half, and particularly in that fourth quarter, that got Miami back into the game, being down to start the fourth. Jimmy Butler on the bench, and they were great. And I think their defense and the changing of that defense from, if it was a 2-3 to a 1-3-1 to a matchup zone, they just kept showing different looks to Denver. And a lot of that being, when you think of a zone and you're guarding space and you're guarding a designated area, Miami did a really good job of bringing a defender on the empty side of the zone to the nail at the free throw line, and it really gave Miami problems. It took away the short roll that Jokic lives in with that pick and roll with Jamal Murray, and then the changing of Kevin Love guarding Aaron Gordon, and that allowed Jimmy Butler to guard Jamal Murray. It's all about matchups when we come down to this series, but I also think it comes back to pace on offense too, where that's where Duncan Robinson, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent had opportunities. The movement was good. Jimmy Butler was attacking more and kicking at the right times. He got his guys shots, and that's what you want. Bam Adebayo's been pretty good in these first 2 games, particularly in game 2. I thought he was great in just trying to guard Jokic as best he could. He's the best matchup for Jokic that they have in terms of trying to guard him. And you're going to have to give up something, but clearly, Miami did a nice job of taking away the passing of Jokic, making him a scorer, which was a topic, after game 2 with Spoelstra. But
don't ask him about that.
Don't ask him about that. But it's just those adjustments really matter, and you saw it on both ends of the floor. And look, Denver, I think when they're going into game 3, there is a moment of, okay, we gave up 16 points really off bad execution on our end, bad communication, fouling jump shooters, bad decisions. KCP had a couple in that stretch in that fourth quarter that really allowed Miami to get back in the game and then ultimately take the lead. But they're kicking themselves. They had a good look, too, that final possession. Jamal Murray getting a clean look at a 3, which was, we always talk about fouling up 3. How does that look for different coaches? And Miami played it out, and here we are 1-1 going back to Miami for game 3. And that's what's really exciting for me is to see, okay, what does Mike Malone do now? What's his adjustment? And I think Michael Porter Jr. has to be very not. I don't think he has to be 25 points and 12 rebounds, but 3 of 17 right now shooting in the finals. He hasn't been that efficient, and he's not been as active as we've seen Michael Porter. He's more standing, and yes, he's a jump shooter, but you'd like to see him just more active and more engaged as a cutter and spacer and just moving a little bit more to help Jokic, to help Jamal Murray. They need his scoring, and he's got to be a little bit more efficient, similar to what Gabe Vincent and Max Strus and Duncan Robinson showed in that game to really propel, because margin for error right now is so slim. It's a make-or-miss league, and the team that has their role players step up and make some plays and make shots, I think is ultimately going to be a big piece of who wins the series.
Okay, I like asking this question, a philosophical question, when it comes to basketball, because there were people complaining on both sides at the end of the game sequence before Jamal Murray took his shot at a game-tying three. And so as the broadcast crew was talking about what was happening, they were wondering out loud if Denver was going to take a timeout to set something up, and also if Miami was going to try to foul and prevent Denver from getting an open look at three to tie the game. Well, neither happened, and they just went with the flow of the game, and Jamal Murray probably got a better look than he should have to tie the game. It didn't go in, and Miami wins. And so I'm just curious, from your perspective, your philosophy, what do you do in that situation if, and it's obviously hindsight's 20/20, but going into it, when you're watching it, what are you thinking? Are you yelling for Denver to call a timeout? Are you yelling for Miami to try to foul and prevent Denver from getting a look at three? Take me through that end of game sequence, because I do think it's very interesting to hear different people, all good basketball minds, have very different answers.
Yeah, because I think both situations, whether you're looking at it from the Denver angle of calling a timeout or you're looking at it from the Miami angle of do you foul, so much of it is based off of the flow of the game and where the game stands at that point. I think you can look at it from first the Denver standpoint. Calling a timeout, at times I agree with calling the timeout, because if you're out of rhythm or out of sync, or you haven't had 2, 3, 4 good possessions, or maybe you've had some turnovers, or you haven't got the ball to your best player, there's a reason to call a timeout, to get on the same page, to dial up something that can get you a good look. But, and this goes back to like what Phil Jackson used to say back in the day in the Jordan, those Jordan years, was there are times where if you get a rebound or you get a steal, like Jordan getting the steal on Karl Malone, right, in the Jazz series, and it's been well documented Phil Jackson had an opportunity to call a timeout there, and he didn't, because the rhythm of the game, the possession prior, Michael hits a jumper, and they didn't want Utah to have a chance to have their own timeout to set their defense and maybe give a different look. So there's a reason maybe why you don't call a timeout.
Jordan pitched off also.
Yeah, well, that's a time for another. Yeah, just a little bit of an extended, right? It would have been an offensive foul at that point. But with Miami, I would have fouled up 3, and I think, and I said this morning with you, Stephen, is there's moments where that can be triggered of, okay, we're going to set our defense here. When the ball comes in, there's a moment where you can foul, because players are so smart that they can bait you into fouling when you shouldn't foul. And so there's a time and a period where you go foul up 3. Then if you can't get a foul or something happens, and we've seen it all the time, anything can happen in these games, late in games, where if you don't feel comfortable as a player and you've missed your opportunity to foul, then you play it out. There's 2 scenarios there going into that final play, and coaches can put on the foul and say, we're going to foul here. They can say, nope, we're playing it clean. And some coaches will say, we're going to foul in these 2-3 seconds if you can get there. If you can't, and it's not a situation where you're in a spot to foul, don't do it and play it out. And I think that's somewhat what they did late in that game. I don't think Miami was going to foul. I think where Spoelstra saw his defense in that fourth quarter, they were so good with that zone, and they were so good changing their defense. And I think they had Miami in a good place where there was some doubt there of what's Miami going to show us here, that they just played it out and didn't foul. And it ultimately paid off and paid dividends, and now we're 1-1. So,
okay, so the next question was just a perfect storm of things happening that allowed Miami to sneak out of Denver with a win, and Denver's going to make their adjustments. Denver's got their bad game behind them, and they're going to go on and roll on and win this series in 5 or 6? Or do you think Miami? I mean, it's dumb that I'm even asking this, considering it's tied 1 game apiece in the finals. Do you think Miami really has a legitimate shot of winning this series?
They do. And I think it's a series. I still think Denver's the favorite. I hate putting the mark on how many games it's going to go, because every game there's just so many things that happen in a game, in an NBA game, especially in the fourth quarter, that can dictate the series. And it's, like I said, make or miss, but a lot of it is attention to detail and adjustments. But I think with Miami, there's 2 things that really jump out to me in Game 2. Number one was they gave up a 40-14 run, and there were multiple times where I thought Denver's going to win this game, and Miami found a way to be resilient, come back multiple times to win Game 2 on the road. Denver hasn't lost at home since March. Miami hasn't won in Denver since 2016. I mean, it's been a long time since Miami has won a game in Denver alone. And they win Game 2 in the NBA Finals to make it 1-1. That's a big deal, and that's a big confidence boost going back home. So that to me was a big deal. We talked about the adjustments, right? Kevin Love starting. He was plus 20 in 22 minutes. Aaron Gordon was just punishing mismatches in Game 1. That adjustment was very big in Game 2 in terms of guarding, because Jimmy Butler had to guard Jamal Murray 35 times in the half court compared to just 4 times in Game 2. I think that really mattered. Not to say Jamal Murray had a bad game, but I just think Jamal Murray had to fight for everything. Nothing was easy for Jamal Murray. That adjustment was big. And then the pace. So much about basketball now is about pace, rhythm, flow. You can play up tempo. You can slow things down. And Miami, in that fourth quarter of Game 2, the pace was at 78. That's the lowest pace for an NBA game in the playoffs thus far. To me, Miami slowed the game down so much in the half court, and their spacing was spread out, so their ball screen action was higher. Their spacing and shooters to the corners, there was so much more open space for Jimmy Butler to attack, which I thought he had way more aggressiveness getting downhill and making passes. He had 9 assists in Game 2 and was really trying to get his guys involved, and they were able to make shots, and then he closed the game in the fourth more. So the energy shift in that fourth quarter of Game 2, there was a 5-minute window there where I thought the game and the series changed, and I think that's where Miami's now got some confidence where they can go back home and think, we're 1-1, we're in our own building. Now the pressure's on Denver to adjust and win a game and steal a game in either Game 3 or Game 4. Now it's a series. But again, you cannot write off Denver because Jokic sees the game of, what do I need to do in this game? Do I need to be a passer? Do I need to be a rebounder? Do I need to be aggressive to score? And I think, not to say that he wasn't confident in his guys in Game 2, but he saw what Miami was doing defensively, and he changed his approach, and he became a scorer. What does Jokic do now, right? Because now Denver's 0-3, and it's that stat that's been used so much. They're 0-3 when Jokic scores over 40, which is crazy to think about. But to me, this is such a small margin for error. Execution, basketball IQ, coaching, those 3 things are so huge in this series. And it's going to be these games, and it's going to be exciting for fans. If we're having games in less than 5 points to dictate a game, that's what's going to make this series a lot of fun. And Miami has been in those moments so many times. For Denver, they've never really been tested in these playoffs. They've blown out teams. They've had a pretty easy road to the finals outside of a couple games against the Suns. Now they're being tested. How are they going to respond? And that's what makes this series so intriguing now.
I've asked you this a couple of times. So now, to me, if Miami loses Game 2 in Denver and they're down 2-0, they don't have nothing to lose, then maybe they need to change the dynamic of the series. Tyler Hero's healthy, they drop him in there, right?
Yep.
I think it's a more difficult decision when it's tied 1 game apiece. You just saw your team go into Denver and win that game, and there is the idea, even though he's a good player, that you could upset the rhythm, upset the rotation.
Yep.
And, I mean, Duncan Robinson, does he do what he does if Tyler Hero's available, right?
Right.
We all talk about how there's a ripple effect. And so based on them winning in Game 2, and there are reports that Tyler Hero did have still some swelling and soreness after he worked out yesterday. And he's even said he doesn't want to upset the rhythm. Do you hold off? Is it like break glass in case of emergency? Do you see how things go in Game 3 if he's available, or is it he's available and we're going to get him back in there?
Yeah, I think it's a question, first off, and this is big with the Heat and really for any team, is the conditioning level is really important. If you're going to throw a player that has been out for so long into a playoff game, let alone a finals game, that conditioning level has to be in a very good spot where you're putting him in a game and he feels comfortable playing both ends of the floor, getting up and down. If it's spot minutes, if it's a restriction on minutes, fine, so be it. But that's something that the player, the coach, and ultimately Pat Riley too, they got to be on the same page of, is it, and the medical staff most importantly, of is Tyler Hero ready to go? Is there something where anything could happen where it sets him back? But obviously, this is the finals, and you're talking about championship. And I think if Tyler Hero is okay to go, and he can make some shots, most importantly, because it is the hand with the shooting piece of it, if he's healthy and ready to go, and he's gone through a workout, and he's gone through pregame, and he feels like he can go, have him be available. If anything, it does throw off maybe the Nuggets game plan, most importantly. I think it's a little bit strategic, too, of Tyler Hero saying, well, I don't want to mess up the rhythm. And all of a sudden, you could see him in Game 3, Game 4, maybe Game 5, where all of a sudden.
My hand is sore.
Yeah, exactly. There's some some game strategy here that's coming into effect using the media, I think, a little bit. But ultimately, make sure he's right and make sure he's able to go. And that to me is you go back to just teams in the finals, the intensity level is so high, your attention to detail is so high. I think, yes, a player can throw off a rhythm a little bit, but if it's in spot minutes and really where this team is at right now, like Caleb Martin was so good in the Boston series. He's been a little banged up. I think what he did in the Boston series, kind of a little bit of an anomaly, but he's still such a big-time player. With adding a player like Tyler Hero, he's a bona fide scorer, shooter, and he's in a little different conversation than Caleb Martin and Max Strus and Duncan Robinson. Those Gabe Vincent, those guys are big pieces to this Miami team. But Tyler Hero was a top 3 scorer for this team. So it's a little bit different of a conversation of, can Tyler Hero play? Is he healthy? Is he ready to go? If so, use him in the right ways. And obviously Eric Spoelstra's been down this road several times, so he's going to play that card, how he plays it. And I do think it's definitely a talking point right now in this series.
All right, let's switch topics to the NBA draft that's coming up on June 22nd. And, of course, your work as a scout for the New Orleans Pelicans, you put a lot of legwork and a lot of time into scouting prospects. So I'm not going to ask you about specific players or what the Pelicans are going to do, unless you'd like to announce the pick right now. I don't know how you could do that because there are several picks ahead of you. But tell me what this is like now until the draft for someone in your role, and what the process will be like as everyone comes together and decides what the game plan is going to be for that 14th overall pick coming up on the 22nd.
Yeah, so, right now I head to New Orleans later this week. I'll be there through the draft. We've just started up player workouts. A lot of teams will bring guys in, have either individualized workouts or more of a group workout type setting where it's more of a 3-on-3 or 2-on-2 type of setting where you can compete a little bit. And obviously the agents are very much a part of, their player and their prospect and their client of putting them in positions for teams where they think their agent, their prospect is in that specific range. For me personally right now, it's more diving back into tape on different guys. You have a good feel of all the players that are in the draft by now. You've seen them, you've studied them, you've gone to games, you've been at the combine. Now you're seeing them in your own group workouts, which is good, and you're more almost eliminating certain guys of where you think their range is, adjusting to your team board and your individual board of how you rank guys. But I think also a big part of this is preparing for those conversations you're going to have as a staff, meaning diving back into all of the intel you've gathered, not just this year, but over the course of years, dating back to when a prospect was in high school, familiarizing yourself with the player and the person and the background and everything that goes into who you might be selecting to bring into your organization and who are you going to invest in. So I'm studying that right now a lot. That's pretty much a big part of my week this week, is just making sure I know all these guys inside and out. And then when we get together as a group, it's more me and our other scouts really starting to have those conversations of who we like, who fits us best. The talent level we discuss, obviously, but we also dive into every aspect of the prospect. And that can be, medical testing. That can be everything from, how he tests in our own market with explosiveness and athleticism and strength and everything with our strength staff and our performance staff, but also, our sports psychologist doing a lot of those testing of the mental health side. That is a big part of the evaluation process as well. So there's still so much going on right now, but you're fine-tuning everything and you're getting your group thought of what the team board's going to look like on draft night. Because when you go into a draft, you're ready, you're prepared, and then whatever adjustments happen, whatever surprises are there, you can adjust to the board and work towards the board, as they always say. And then you're obviously having that dialogue during the draft, going back to what your meetings were leading into the draft, and that's what this process is right now. It's a fun, it's exciting time, but it's all the work you've done over the course of the year. It hits right now when you go into what we call our Super Bowl. So it's a big, big week, and we're 2 weeks away. So here we are.
Okay, so this is like, probably dumb questions, but for people that aren't aware of the process of what you do. So do you have like a group of players that you rank? Do you have like a certain score that you give to players or a grade?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like how do you like when you present this, or how do you separate? How do you organize the different prospects based on what you've seen and how you've evaluated them?
Yeah, so we as a regional scout, I cover specific leagues. I'm Big 12, Big 10, and oversee a lot of the SEC as well, Missouri Valley. But so it's not like I'm technically in the Midwest, and we have West Coast, we have an East Coast scout, but you're mostly covering your leagues, and then you're talking about all players. Like you have to have, you have had to seen all these guys at the end of the day. But then when you break it down into your conferences, that's who you have primary responsibility on, and you're really supposed to know the ins and outs of the background, of the intel, of the information of, what the type of person is that you're bringing in, the family background, anything pertaining to, stops along the way now, with transferring being so, at the front of college basketball right now.
And you're talking to coaches.
Yes,
you're
plenty.
Talking to support staff.
High school coaches, academic coordinators, strength coaches.
No.
You're going deep into the weeds, and I told you this probably about 3 weeks ago, a month ago. I was on campus visits, so you're kind of fine tuning that final information gathering where you're talking to a lot of people in person on specific guys that we call primary.
Can you tell like when a high school coach, can you tell when he's like, telling you the truth, or where he's you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, 'cause I'm sure
that
these guys with the fans have reached out and say, hey, can you
maybe
not mention this. I mean, you've got to have a BS finder there, right?
That's right.
When you can,
absolutely,
you can tell if you're getting the real story about something.
Yeah. It's all about credibility, right?
Right.
And some of these high school coaches, maybe this is the first time they've had someone, that is this high, in terms of
they'd want them to get
they'd
drafted.
want them
so
to get drafted.
Say, hey, I coached a first round pick. I don't know about you, but
I think, especially with like the high school side of it, they can give you just good stories of, what the prospect and what the player was like in a classroom, in a high school classroom. How were they with the student body? What interests did they have in high school?
I'm so glad that Union Broadcasting didn't do any of this.
All right.
When investigating
exactly.
my background.
And I did. My brother always gives me a hard time. Like, so are you kind of like a private investigator? And it's not to, write off a guy off anything, because we were all 17, 18 years old. So it's just knowing, it's just being aware. You don't want to be caught off guard.
I'm not asking for specifics, but have you ever gone and found something out in high school from a coach or someone that said, you know what, can't draft him, or that's taking him out of consideration?
Yeah. It's happened before.
So there is,
but it was an extreme case,
right?
It was an extreme case.
But the point is, it's just not busy work.
Right.
There is,
right.
Or have you, on the other side of the coin, have you been maybe like lukewarm or on the fence about a prospect, but then you go and hear the way a coach talks about him, or former teammates or support staff, or what he was like, and you think, you know what, man, these intangibles make me look at him a little bit differently.
Yeah, so I think it's why you have to have a lot of different sources. You can't just, hitch your wagon to one person, of if it's the high school coach or the college head coach or the college video coordinator. Like, you want to have a lot of different sources and a lot of different input, and then you try to find the consistency.
Like a little notepad,
yeah. I mean, you have a database, and I save all my stuff is the information I've gathered, and then I go back and read through not just everything I have, but everything our staff has got too. Our GM, our assistant GM, other scouts, and it's great because you get different thoughts and perspective, and that's what's so great about meeting as a group. Is there's things that are brought to me that I might not know. That might be something that one of our West Coast scouts that has a better relationship and has known a coach over several years, that maybe they gave him stuff that is a little bit different that we haven't heard, or maybe that coach just had a bad experience, and that's one angle of this. And there's a lot of different reasons behind why that coach didn't maybe like or didn't gel with one of his players. You have to look at everything and take everything and have an open mind. Most importantly, to me, I think the where you can really be wrong on a guy is when you go too far into the intel, when it sways your mind, and to what you said earlier, the kid's 18 years old and 19 years old, and maybe he didn't have any sort of leadership.
Some of these kids you're drafting are 19 years old.
Exactly. And
then, are you going back to like 16 years old? I mean, because they're 19. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
well, and I think it's what's about the NBA draft that's so different than the MLB draft and the NFL draft and some of these other drafts is, in baseball, yes, you can draft guys out of high school. It's a little bit different if they're going to go to college or not, but you're putting them in a minor league system right away, and they know they're going to a minor league system. With us, it's different in that we could be drafting a guy that's 19 years old that has been in college for 1 year or been out of high school for 1 year that is eligible, but they don't want to go to a G League system. They want to come in right away, and you have to kind of really weather the storm, and it's why you have to know everything about the player and how they think, how they're wired, who's in their inner circle, who's their influencers. You mentioned the intangibles. The intangibles, it's a big word because there's so many factors that are under those intangibles that you just have to know, because when your coaches, when we have, and we do Zooms with our coaching staff, when they're asking you questions because they don't know anything about these guys from just what we've seen on the floor and what we know, we have to be able to tell them what's going on. We have to be able to tell our player development staff about these guys so they're aware that when there's that handoff, when you draft the player, and then all of a sudden they're in their build, they got to know everything. And they're going to go back and look through all the work I've done to get up to speed. And that's what makes this process a great process, and there's so much involved in it because it starts from when they're 16 years old. It starts from when I talk to that academic coordinator, and it goes all the way through to when our head coach is asking about it on draft night. That's what makes it interesting.
Okay, so like I get asked this question about, like what coaches do you enjoy interviewing the most?
Mm-hmm.
Who's the guy that is the best guest to be on a show? And what people don't like it, you know what I'm going to say. Bill Self. He's always great to have on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just as a Mizzou fan, it pains me. But then you talk to him, and then you think, oh, well, this is one of the reasons why he's such a great recruiter.
Yeah,
I mean, he's got that it factor, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
Same thing, like, and you'll love this. Like whenever we've had Bob Huggins on the show, you're going to get great answers and a great interview, and it's going to be fun, right? And so maybe same question to you, like what coach has been maybe the most enjoyable, like a college coach, just to go talk to, or just open to having you at practices, or someone you really enjoy being around, maybe learned the most around in your role as a scout?
Mm-hmm.
Is there when you see I'm going to go here, I know he's going to be open, he's going to be honest, this is going to be good, I'm going to learn some stuff, it's going to be great to go to his practice. Like, who do you look forward to meeting up with?
I mean, it's tough. So, I mean, first of all, I'm very lucky and fortunate because I think there's a lot of guys that I could say. So it's tough to just say one because
we can say a couple of them.
Yeah, I go back to, like, when you have coaches that you've now built trust and relationships over 4 to 6 years. I've been in the league now 6 years, even dating back before that. Norm Roberts comes to mind at Kansas. I talk to him all the time, and we text,
He's
call.
good. He was a regular guest on the show. He's good.
He's great. I'm so happy he had an opportunity, when Coach Self was out a little bit to be a head coach. And you're right. Like, Coach Self is he's real, and he's not going to lie. That's the thing. He's going to be up front, and he's going to talk, and he's going to keep it real. And he's like that as on the floor with his guys, and he's like that off the floor. And I think that's what everybody respects about him is there's no sugarcoating things. He's going to keep it as is, and he's the same guy. And I appreciate that about Coach Self. There's other guys like Chris Holtman at Ohio State, the head coach. Have a great relationship with him. We drafted E.J. Liddell, St. Louis kid, and Coach Holtman is the best to deal with. He's an open door. Every time I go to Columbus, they treat me with such great hospitality, and a lot of these schools do. So I'm just giving you a name, but I think it's really great when you draft the player from the program, and you're able to have that conversation with the head coach, and they know we're taking their guy, and it's been talked about. And I'm the direct guy communicating with the coaches on draft night because he's in my area, and then when you select that player, being able to, hear from the coaches and, kind of see the reaction that they're sending you content because they're with the player at the time, that's really meaningful because it really kind of brings it all together where now, me and Coach Holtman have such a great relationship because I took one of his guys, and we took one of his guys, I should say, but I was a big part of that process. That's when it kind of comes full circle. But John Jacobs at Baylor, we talk all the time as well. He's a terrific assistant, and I has been a huge part of that staff at Baylor, runs a lot of their offense. And you talk about Baylor's offense over the years, guard heavy. John Jacobs is at the forefront of that. So he would be at the top of the list.
I bet Jerome Tang's fun to deal with.
Jerome Tang is fantastic. That whole staff at Kansas State, by the way, that Kevin Sutton, who was a prep school head coach back in the day, he's so good. That staff, Ulrich, who was at Texas, great assistant coach, great recruiter. I think it's also fun to see the younger guys that I knew before they made it to where they are, like Rod Clark, who is an assistant at Tennessee. He was on the top 30 assistants under, I think under 40. He's such a big time assistant coach, and he's worked for Coach Barnes. He has ties here to Kansas City. Worked for Mocan. That's how he got started. So you build like bonds with these guys, and then they become friends of yours. So when you see them all the time, and you talk to them all the time, there's that bond there. But there's also those moments of like you kind of pinch yourself, right? When you go to Michigan State and you're going to watch a coach that you grew up watching as a kid and you've idolized and admired in Tom Izzo, and you're meeting not just him, but like the guy that's been underneath him for several years, for 25 plus years, that they've been such a tight bond together, and to have those conversations with the coaches after a practice and building those relationships is really when it kind of comes full circle for you of being in the game and in the sport for so long, and now you build these relationships with coaches and you see why they're so good at what they do, and you see how they protect their players in the right ways, but also have that sense of understanding of what my job is and why I'm there, and how it's important for them to have a relationship with me from a standpoint of making, at this point in the game when their players are on the in the draft and there's a chance that they can get drafted, there has to be a good relationship there across the board. And they're doing that with all sorts of teams. But that's when it gets really fun, when you start to meet guys and you really get a sense of building those great relationships with the coaches over the years. And it's genuine, and they're always there for you if you need them. That's when it's really special.
I know it's not your area, but I bet that Kim English is a real red ass to deal with, huh?
Oh, yeah. Coach English, man.
That's so crazy, though.
It's wild, Coach too. English. I know. And
Providence head coach.
And it's so weird to me when it's like, me and Kim have had to, usually when we've talked in the past, right, it's been about, our friends, how's, your parents doing, what's how the girls doing.
It's real talk now.
Now it's like we'll have conversations, and it's like, we're talking about players. He's asking me my advice on things. I'm asking his advice on things. But it's great when obviously my college roommate, my college teammate is a head coach in a league like the Big East, and Kim, his success speaks for itself, and he's such a bright, intelligent mind, basketball mind, and he's a great great coach, great recruiter, the whole bit. And now he's in a different type of role where it's like, man, I don't want to waste his time, just like I would any other coach, right? You know what I mean? But it's like it's Kim too. So it's that to me is it's and when I remember going to see like his practice when he was at George Mason, and just sitting there thinking like, man, like he's so good, and it's just so fun to see him in a different light. And then he's so excited that I'm there.
I feel like it was yesterday that I'm watching Phil St. John at Kim English basketball camp.
Right.
But you could just see, but that's you could tell, like, even when he was a player, and he used to come on the show when he was a player, and just all the way back from when he had a stuttering issue and he didn't feel comfortable giving interviews, and he kept giving interviews, and he got better and better. And by the time he was at Mizzou, he was the best interview of any college player we ever had. Right. But you would see him and listen to him talk about basketball, and it was almost like you were talking to a coach. And then, and I know it's hey, look, it's just one observation, but then you would watch the way he would interact with kids and the way he would run his camp.
Right.
And I've been fortunate enough to watch my kids at a bunch of basketball camps. Like, oh, he knows what he's doing.
Right.
The organization, just everything. And he's just one of those guys. I know you hear that from a lot of different people, but like, you knew he was going to be a coach.
Right.
If he was going to pursue it, he had all the tools necessary to be a successful head coach.
It was just a matter of when. That exactly. But Stephen, like, I also think it's refreshing when let's take like Brad Underwood and Eric Musselman I have great relationships with. And like,
does Musselman make you take your shirt off when you talk to him?
No, unfortunately.
Hey, Jerry, come here.
You can't come in my office unless you take your shirt off now. But like those guys, like
it'd be a good icebreaker though.
It would be. And Coach Underwood, like when he's got a voice and it's like demonstrative. I mean, when he gets after a guy, like then you see them on the floor with their teams in a practice. And you see why their guys love them. You see why they love playing for them. You see where it connects. And that's what makes it fun for me as a scout, is to see like there is still that like hard coaching, that's toughness, that's like motivating and trying to inspire a guy to go harder and do more and improve and all these factors. And there's so many other distractions now that coaches have to deal with and worry about for their players. But then you have I remember like in the mornings in October, if you go to an Illinois practice, Brad Underwood has practice at 6 a.m. Kim English is doing this early morning practice. You go in and you sit.
Maybe that's Kim English right now calling in.
Is Kim hearing
Hey,
us
Ben, why
right
don't
now?
you come and answer this phone?
So you go to a morning practice at Illinois, and Brad Underwood, like he comes down, and the players aren't on the floor yet. They're watching film or they're getting taped, and Brad Underwood just comes down and sits down and just has a conversation with you. And that's what's great. And you tie into, like, I work with Gar Foreman, who was the GM of the Bulls for so many years, and Gar knows all these guys. So you start to tie in, just how tight knit this industry really is. At the end of the day, of everybody kind of knows everybody, but there's still, a level of like doing your job and being, you're a representative of the New Orleans Pelicans organization, and they look at you like that. You're the team representative on campus, on site, feet on the ground, and you have to, make sure that you're abiding by that. And I take that very seriously. It's something I don't take lightly, and I think that's what, coaches, they want to test you, especially the older coaches. When 5 years ago when I'm coming into the league and I'm at one of their practices, I'm sort of thinking, who is this guy? Now to build those relationships over the years and have those relationships very meaningful for me.
It's early on in the process, but one of the things that stands out to me about some of these coaches we're talking about, we've already seen several examples from Self and Musselman, and I think the early returns from Tang and from Dennis Gates, I think, have their fan bases hopeful that this is the way it's going to be. But the transfer portal, right, and getting all these new players in, and you're trying to evaluate these players on the fly, not only as individuals, but how they fit together,
right,
and the pieces, how they fit together. And maybe that's why we've seen, okay, so I'll use Musselman as an example, that Arkansas is such a different team the past couple of years at the end of the season compared to the beginning of the season, because it feels like and not that they're trying to lose games or they don't care about winning in the non-con or early on in the season, but he's figuring things out because there's so many new pieces, and he's figuring out, okay, this combination works, and maybe this doesn't. And then by the time you get halfway through the conference season, he's got it figured out, and that's why Arkansas is different. Hopefully that's what we're going to see with Missouri, and that's what you're going to see with Kansas State with regularity. That's what you see with Kansas, because that's the game now.
It is.
And so that's what's going to separate these coaches, being able to do that on the fly and evaluate not only individual players, but how they fit together so they're playing their best ball in March.
Yeah, and I think when during the course of these last 3 months, let's say since the end of April or the beginning of April after the national championship, some time passes, and then you start having these dialogues with coaches, head coaches, assistants, these campus visits, and it's a big topic of conversation, obviously, and it's something they're dealing with every single day with the NIL and the portal and the jokes and the stories that you hear about, just what it is and what they're dealing with on a day-to-day. It's different. And sometimes I feel like I'm almost like a sounding board a little bit, because I think there's enough trust there built where there's some venting going on. They know they can trust me with just what they're dealing with, because it's a lot and it's different. And it's not necessarily why they got into it years back, right? You're talking about, Norm Roberts, who's been in the business for so many years, was a head coach himself. I mean, they're having to evolve, right? And they're okay with doing that. There's no problem. They've had to do it before in their careers. It's just trying to get a hold of it and trying to understand what it is and understanding their own selves in the recruiting process and who do you trust, right? And that's what we deal with too.
There's some older coaches that don't want to do it.
No,
and that's why they're getting out of it. They don't want to mess with it.
They don't want to mess with it, and it's too much noise and it's things that they're not about. And I respect that, and I understand that, and I appreciate that. But those things, unfortunately, are not changing with where society is, right? I mean, that's a huge part of what it is. Social media being a huge part of what this is. Parents and money involved, and sometimes I know it's been talked about quite a bit of what Eli Drinkowitz said about money and these players having to handle that, and it is true. But at the same time, like this is good. I mean, it's good for them to have being compensated for being an athlete that is bringing a lot of money into the university, and with that comes responsibility, and you got to grow up, and that's part of it.
He was a great coach. But it doesn't seem like a guy like Bruce Weber was in love with where things were headed.
Cuonzo Martin wasn't in love with it.
Yeah, right. Cuonzo Martin is, and it just
great coaches and great motivators and great teachers, but it's a different game. And I get it. I mean, I get the frustration behind it. It's taking away from what you know and how you run your program. But that's what it is now, and you can, like any coach would say this. It's so built off of your coaching staff too. Like, if you're going to put all the pressure on yourself, you're not making use of your staff. And to me now, you're seeing coaches that are hiring staff that are willing and able to get a hold of that stuff, to understand what they're looking for, still identifying talent, still identifying the intangibles, because they're doing the same things that we do. They're trying to identify who they want to bring in, who they can trust, who can fit the mold of their culture and their locker room and all those things. But then there's the other aspect that is new to them, which is dealing with NIL and dealing with how do these guys, are these guys just in this for the money? Are these guys really wanting to come here to win? Like, you're still evaluating that just like everybody is.
Well, the other thing that we don't talk about very much, but I hear not only in basketball but in football, why is he getting that much money?
Absolutely. It's the biggest question they're dealing with.
How come he got offered that and I only got offered this?
Exactly.
You don't think that causes problems in the locker room?
Absolutely.
You don't know what's going on.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, the college coaches, they're not technically supposed to be dealing with anything with NIL, and
can you imagine in the locker, like if you guys are all making a difference about, like, whoa, hold on here.
Yeah. I mean, and it gets talked about.
Right.
And most importantly, though, I think the biggest thing is the families that are connected to these players or agents that get connected to these players that feed them all this stuff. That's the challenge.
Or all the reports about players being promised a certain amount,
yeah,
and then they don't get it.
Or which I've heard this plenty of times. They get to campus, they've signed their NIL deal, the package. It's a contract. They don't live up to that contract.
You have to do this. You have to appear here.
Right.
You have to go there.
All of a sudden,
and then they don't do it.
you haven't no-showed at 3 different events, and it's in the contract that they can rip it up right in front of you, and they do that.
I know who you're talking about. I'm not gonna say it, but I know you're talking.
It's not. I mean, it's not just one guy.
Right.
It's definitely been something that's been out there quite a bit. So, yeah,
you just showed up for everything. Right, if you
to.
would have had NIL, you'd have been everywhere, right?
It was a little different for me.
Well, if you would have been, you
yes,
know.
absolutely. It's a part about growing up, leaving your parents, being, getting to college. That's where you really grow up and become your own self, right? It's part of being in college, and you got to go to class. You got to go to your obligations.
Okay, so to come full circle with what you said about Drinkwitz, that's when he got crushed for it because it was taken out of context. That was one of the points he was trying to make.
Yeah,
we're giving all this money to 18 and 19-year-old kids, but then we're not telling them how to handle it.
Yeah.
And we're not explaining to them the responsibility of it. And also there comes along with all that, there's some responsibility.
Yep.
And so he was talking about how there should be more guidelines, and more guardrails because he was talking about, the question was about, and let's be honest, that's something else too that's going to be an issue of players gambling. Hell, Alabama had to fire their baseball coach because of this. And so when you give an 18 and 19-year-old kid a bunch of money, I know Jared Sutton, you were a good, upstanding young man. If I'd have thrown $500,000 at you when you're 18 years old, I don't know where you would have done with it.
Just being put on scholarship, I was like, what is this? I went from walk-on to being on scholarship. I thought it was the greatest thing ever.
What is this? Given to me? Oh, for books? Right.
I am getting some sort of stipend. What is
this?
Right,
but that's a lot. That's what he was talking about, right?
Yeah, and I think, too, and, I get what Eli was trying to say, and there are probably things, he's probably looking back in hindsight saying, okay, maybe I shouldn't have gone that far. But I think what he's trying to say, and I think so many times it's like you have to lean on one side of the aisle, and many times, sometimes both cases can be true. One of the cases is NIL is good for college athletics. It's long overdue. Compensating athletes has been at the forefront of dating back to when I was in college, when this wasn't around, when you're seeing Phil Pressey's jersey and Kim English's jersey and Marcus Denman's jersey, and the university is profiting so much of us winning 30 games and being on ESPN and the business of college athletics and what college coaches were making when, I know there's certain players that I played with, teammates of mine, that didn't come from great means. And this is important now because these players can start to make money in college because it is a job. It is a job, full-time, full-fledged job to be a college athlete. Then there's the other side of that where that's great and all, but that doesn't mean we can't improve it. That doesn't mean the restrictions and the guidelines to even the playing field and to make it a little bit, just get our grasp of it, get your hands on a little bit. Because at this point right now, I don't think it's sustainable. I just think there's so many things that have to be corrected, and it will. We'll get there, but it's the growing pains of this that I think are tough for coaches. End of the day, though, coaches have to understand the days of you controlling everything that goes on in your program and anything you say goes, and if you don't abide by this, your minutes, those days are over. You're going to have to somehow connect and think differently of, yes, players are more empowered than ever now, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It still means you can coach and be tough and have those hard conversations with players and be honest and coach guys hard. That's okay. You can still do that. But you have to see this for what it is now. And it's different than it was in 1994. It's a little different now, and you have to be willing and able to coach in today's environment.
All right, final question before we wrap things up for this episode. This is a recent story at CBSSports.com from this morning, and I think this is fascinating. It's Dennis Dodd wrote about the Big 12 and Brett Yormark, the very aggressive commissioner, pursuing Gonzaga and UConn to try to expand the dominance of the Big 12 in basketball. And I'm just curious what you think of that. Gonzaga and UConn possibly in the Big 12, because it's when the article describes there's been a mutual admiration between Gonzaga and the Big 12, but now there seems to be even more momentum for UConn to join the Big 12.
I love it. I think this is something. I mean, I played in the Big 12.
Good God, think of that basketball
it would be awesome. I mean, I think, too, I've said this so many times, like the Big 12 needs to embrace you always say, well, the Big 12 is the best league in or one of the best, leagues in college basketball, and it is. So embrace that. Like, you're having schools leave the Big 12 to go to the SEC, and so much is made about football and money, and I get it. Like, I totally understand that. But at the end of the day, the popularity of the Big 12 is in basketball, period. Like, no offense to the football programs in the Big 12, and I mean, obviously the history of Kansas State football, they just won the Big 12 last year. Like, yeah, I'm not taking anything away from that, but let's call it what it is. The Big 12 in basketball, it always seems to shine year in and year out, and it was just Kansas at one point. Chris Beard was great for Texas Tech. You've seen Baylor have so much success. You saw Texas have great success this year, even though they had so many things go on with Chris Beard. You've seen now the adjustment the Big 12 is making in adding Houston and bringing Kelvin Sampson back to the Big 12. Like, to me, there's so much potential with the Big 12 in basketball to take it to even another level where you're competing even more with the SEC and the Big East and the ACC. I love it. I'm all on board with this. And I said this when I was a player back in the day when Mizzou was in the Big 12. Like, Big 12 basketball is big time. It's a great league. It's a great conference. It's got the best coach in college basketball in it. Build around that. Embrace that. Absorb. I know it doesn't match what the conversation is with football and money and the financial part of it, but the popularity of it and the fan interest and the engagement and what college basketball and the Big 12 brings to just the sport in general and college athletics, build on that. Gonzaga is a great program looking to get to a conference out of the WCC where they can be more competitive. And then you got UConn, who just won the national championship, and they're a basketball school looking for a basketball league.
Elite basketball.
Elite, yeah, exactly. So I love this. This, to me, is long overdue, and I hope it comes to fruition. I have my doubts just because of what always holds this up, and that is college football and the money that it brings in, and that's what every athletic director sinks their teeth into. But basketball, to me, when it comes February and March, some of those ADs go, wait a second, basketball, this is where our fan engagement is. Why would we not build on that?
It could be a slight adjustment to the Jared Sutton travel schedule.
That's right. Yeah.
Happens. We'll see. But you know what? That's a lot of basketball we're throwing at you, but it's the House of Hustle. And we talk about basketball, so what do you want from us, all right? We want to thank Charlie Hustle. You love Charlie Hustle,
I love Charlie Hustle. I got so much, like, the vintage swag, new gear, like we just saw with the Nick Bolton T-shirt. They always come out. I'm always like,
Nick Bolton T-shirt.
How are they going to outdo themselves this time? And they always seem to do it every time.
Tiger arms with a football. I mean, I need that shirt.
The creativity.
Absolutely.
So good.
Thank you, Jared Sutton, and thank you for watching and listening. This has been House of Hustle. And remember, Kansas City is for hustlers.